Yeah, so I think first of all, as you said, Ronaldo, it simply doesn't work. So even people who aren't really ready to embrace a spiritual position, and I'll come back to what I mean by spiritual in a minute, simply see that it doesn't work, and that a way of teaming and sharing and being inclusive and living in that consciousness of abundance actually does work, is a great incentive to get people who are simply focused on the bottom line, at least to embrace those principles. But I'll tell you, I meet business executives all the time, and we hear about the greedy people. We don't hear about the average business executive who I meet, who really are people who live in a very different consciousness, and who are socially responsible, and who do care, and do want to give back, and do want to participate, and do live in a sense of gratitude much of the time. And that creates a sustainable business, that creates partnership. The story I tell in my book, to go back to a story, is a story of this fellow named Safra, and this is told in the Talmud, which is the Jewish book of kind of the ethical debate. And Safra is trying to sell a donkey, and he's standing by the side of the road, and there's a sign in front of the donkey that says "for sale," and a very wealthy man who needs a donkey comes by. And just as he comes by, Safra notices it's time for his afternoon prayers. It's time for him to connect back to spirit, and he starts to say his prayers. And the wealthy man looks at the donkey and wants it and says, "I'll give you $100 for the donkey." Well, Safra can't answer because he's engaged in prayer. And so the wealthy man, thinking that his number is too low, doubles it to 200. And Safra is still engaged in prayer, can't answer. Finally, he offers him $400 for his donkey. Safra finishes his prayers and looks at the man and says, "Your first offer is acceptable. I'm not going to use the fact that I was engaged in a spiritual practice to take advantage of you and get a bigger number." So he gets the $100. This wealthy man sees in Safra an ethical businessman. He starts to send his friends over to Safra. They start doing business with Safra. His shop teams. The wealthy man gets the right deal. Safra gets more business. And everybody wins through that simple approach. If he had just taken the $400, the man would never have come back to him. Safra would have not been true to his spirit, and it would have been just a one-time windfall. So there's an example written 2,000 years ago of contrasting greed and abundance.
Yeah, and let's just take that, because I want to take and stew your question, which is about Wall Street in the abstract, in the aggregate. And I think it's a good question. But now I want to drill it down to where Alan just was, the individual. I want to talk about what real success is for a minute, Alan, in the sense that, it may be that for me to be fully happy, for me to really get the benefit of life that I came here to live. And by the way, there's a quote that's not in your book I would share with you because it ties nicely to the one about that you mentioned with Chardin, where spiritual beings have known as physical experience. Ram Dass once said, "Look, we're spiritual beings, and we took a body. If we took a body, take the curriculum. This is school."
Right. Yeah.
So we take the curriculum, and what I think the curriculum is it's learning how to integrate this bodiness, this physical stuff thing, with who we are as beings. I've seen very few human beings, no matter what their career or profession is, who don't have a smile on their face when they gently touch the forehead of a sleeping child. I've seen very few human beings that don't have a tear in their eye when they see an atrocity committed against an infant, a child, or a woman. So, to me, we are human beings, and we all know that. The question I find fascinating is, if people are willing to accept that not all of us are supposed to be billionaires, not all of us are supposed to be 100 millionaires, but all of us are supposed to have enough substance to keep body and soul together, to do what we came here to do in the world, to be as successful as we're supposed to be on the material plane, but what we're supposed to find is that place that's unique to us, where our integration of our happiness quotient is what is the driver of our material wealth. In other words, we don't trade spiritual happiness for material success, nor do we artificially say, "Oh, I got to be sackwash and ashes because I'm a spiritual guy." And your book does touch on that latter point.
Right.
So I'd just like you to focus for a minute. It seems to me that people need to be reassured that it turns out to be a balanced human being, an integrated human being, is not to imply less success. It's to have a broader definition of what that success might mean in this individual's life and free them up to actually achieve it. Is that your experience?
Well, for sure. I mean, look, if we simply measure success by how much you've got in the bank, I know people who I know a man who's worth $80-100 million who thinks he doesn't make enough because he's not a billionaire, and he's unhappy with that. And I like to think of the example of two families. If you just want to talk about money for a minute, and then I'll move on. But one who makes $50,000 and one who makes $200,000, and suddenly next year they both make $100,000. Suddenly the $50,000 family feels very grateful, and the $200,000 family feels like they're going to have to live on a shoestring, and they're both making the same. So that's certainly a very subjective way to measure your success. But from a spiritual perspective, I think all religious traditions teach this. We're here for an individual purpose, and it's by tuning into that purpose and living that purpose that we have abundance and that we have joy, and that we have happiness. And it's by remembering who we really are, and that we're put into physical form so we can make these difficult choices. Because as spirit, spirit is always connected to its source. Spirit can only do God's bidding, if you will, but within the physical body, we have the ability to choose something else. But it's through the choice itself that we grow closer to each other, and we grow closer to ourselves, and we elevate the spirit in the world itself. And so we're given these temptations, and we're given these choices so that we can grow, and so our spirit can learn.
And in just applying that to conventional sales or anything, the law of attraction says that if people basically find you engaging, and they're in the marketplace for your good or service in some broad fashion, the odds are they'll want to transact with you because they'll feel safer. Mm-hmm. They'll feel that they want to share in some of the joy you're exhibiting, mm-hmm. some of the bonhomie, some of the confidence, some of the quiet inner peace. And to me, I find that being an integrated body, mind, and spirit individual is the number one best way to be successful in all senses of the word in business. That's my experience.
Yeah, it's charismatic. When people see that, they're drawn to that right away, and people respect it. People they respect it because that's what they know they're supposed to be, or that's what they know they can be, and it's very appealing. And look, in our business, people work with who they trust, and there's a trust that's engendered when somebody is being that way that draws people in.
Absolutely. Let me go back to that word "can be," that people know that they can be. I think that part of what your book does, and part of why I wanted to have this conversation today, is I wanted to make sure that people know that they not only can be spiritual beings having a physical experience, and that that's a successful option.
Yeah, I
would like to urge them it's the most successful option.
Sure, that's right.
And you know what? The worst that can happen is you end up happy. That's not so good.
That's right. Imagine that.
Imagine that. What a concept. We have three missions when we started the Academy in 1985-86, we had three basic missions we adopted. It's sort of a tripartite mission. The first one is to change, and notice the word consciousness is in all three, to change the consciousness of the existing business leadership from a predator to a steward mentality. Mm-hmm. To be a steward of the collective commons rather than to be a predator on the commons. Mm-hmm. The second one is to change the consciousness of young people going to business, particularly in our business schools, so they see themselves as entering a noble profession. I want to come back to that, because it is a noble. And you act differently if it's a noble profession than you think you're in a jungle.
Right.
And the third one is change the consciousness of the public at large so it puts its money where its values are. Mm-hmm. So if the public starts to see that it can trust certain individuals, that it is safer with certain companies, it will clearly start to transact with them. And those they do not feel safe with will cease to exist, literally.
Right.
So going back to the second one, I think your book, though, is really about our second mission, the second part of our mission, which is to help people recognize that business is, in fact, a noble profession. And you did something really fun in the foreword. I never heard this before. You took the Hebrew word, avodah, which is the Hebrew word for work, and you pointed out that it's also the word for prayer,
right?
Which I thought was fascinating. And what you're saying in the book is just as we pray for the blessings of spiritual sustenance, I'm quoting, we are not only free, I think we're encouraged to work for the blessings of physical sustenance. And that comes from the idea that we can get for ourselves without hurting others, and in fact, if we do it right, we create abundance and joy for others in the process. To me, that's really one of the powerful messages of your book. You can be in this noble pursuit called business. Your ethics automatically take care of themselves. You don't have to worry about what you'll do to other people or yourself, because in pursuit of it, you will be an integrated human being. And most importantly, you will come out with the level of success that your unique personality needs in order to be supported the way you are in the world. That, to me, was a big takeaway of the book. And I hope people would see it that way.